There is a particular kind of silence that arrives in the early hours of the morning, in that space between deep night and the first gray suggestion of dawn, when the rest of the world is still and you are not. You know this silence. I do not have to describe it to you. Maybe you are in it right now. Maybe you woke and could not say why, and there was something pressing on your chest that was not quite fear and not quite grief, but something that lives in the country between them, something heavy and unnamed. Maybe you have been carrying something for so long that you no longer remember what it felt like not to carry it. And in that silence, in those hours when everything is dark and the house is quiet and your own thoughts are the loudest thing in the world, you have asked the question that every human soul eventually asks. You have said into that darkness, is anyone there? You may have said it in words. You may have said it only in the ache of a moment too long to endure alone. But you have asked it. I know you have, because every soul that has ever lived has asked it. And I want to tell you what I found. My name is Elijah Mizrahi. I am a Sephardic Jewish rabbi, 70 years old, and I have spent the better part of my life inside the Torah the way other men spend their lives inside a profession or a passion. The words of the Hebrew Scriptures were not something I studied alongside my life. They were my life. By the time I was 12, I had memorized entire portions of the Pentateuch. By the time I was 30, I had given everything, completely and without reservation, to the service of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to the care of a community that looked to me to help them understand what it meant to walk faithfully before the Almighty in a world that made that very difficult. I tell you all of this not to impress you. I tell you this so that when I say what I am about to say, you will understand the weight of it. Because everything changed. And I do not mean everything changed a little. I mean that a man who thought he understood the house he had lived in his whole life discovered one day that there was a room in it he had never entered. And when he stepped through that door, the entire house was transformed. Let me tell you something that changed my life. Let me tell you about a night that altered the entire direction of everything. It came after a long season of what I can only call the silence of God, that particular and terrible season that every person of faith eventually enters, where you pray and the heavens feel like stone, where you speak the words and they seem to fall at your feet and go nowhere. I had been in that season for almost 2 years, 2 years of praying and feeling nothing. My community did not know. A rabbi does not bring his desert to his congregation. He carries it quietly and continues to lead, while inside he is whispering, "Where are you? Where have you gone?" It was a night in the early hours of the morning. In that time I have come to know as the threshold hour, somewhere between 3 and 5, when I woke from sleep and could not say why. There was no dream. There was no sound. There was simply an awareness, sudden and complete, that I was awake, and something was asking me to rise. I did not want to rise. I was tired in the deeper place, where exhaustion is not a physical thing, but a spiritual one. But I rose. I went to my study, sat in the chair I had sat in for 30 years of early morning learning, and I opened my Hebrew Bible. It fell open to Isaiah, chapter 53. Now let me tell you something about this chapter. In the tradition in which I was raised, this passage was not something we read easily or often. The chapter describes a figure called the Eved Hashem, the servant of the Lord, and this servant suffers in a way so specific and so detailed that when you read it carefully in the Hebrew, you feel as if you are reading a description of something that has already happened. The servant is despised and rejected. He is a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was wounded for our transgressions. The Hebrew word is mekalal, pierced. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And by his wound, by his bruise, the Hebrew word is chabarato, we are healed. He is cut off from the land of the living for the transgression of the people. And then the text does something extraordinary. It does not end there. He is given a portion with the great. He sees the fruit of his suffering and is satisfied. This is not the end. This is a passage through. I had read this chapter before. Of course I had. But I had always read it with the interpretations I had been taught layered over it, the way you sometimes cannot see a painting because the glass over the frame is reflecting the room back at you. That night, at 3 a.m, exhausted and empty, and somehow more awake than I had been in years, I read it differently. I read every word as if for the first time. And something happened in me. Something broke open. Because the figure in those verses, this pierced servant who takes upon himself the iniquities of many, who makes himself an offering for sin, and who continues after this death, who is not destroyed by it but passes through it, that figure had a name in my heart that I had spent my entire adult life being very careful not to speak. I am going to speak it now. I am an old man. I do not have so many years left that I can afford to spend them being careful about things that matter. The name that came to my heart in that hour was Yeshua, Jesus, and I sat in my study and I wept because I understood in the way that you understand something when you finally stop arguing with it, that what Isaiah had written 700 years before the Common Era was describing something real, something that had happened, something I had been reading about my whole life without allowing myself to see it. Let me take you into the Hebrew text for a moment, because what the Hebrew text actually says will change the way you understand everything. In Genesis 3, in the garden, when the consequences of the first great turning away from God are being spoken into the world, God says to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. The scholars call this the proto-evangelion, the first gospel, the first announcement of a coming redemption. The seed of the woman, a strange phrase in a tradition where genealogy always runs through the father. This one who is coming will crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent will wound his heel, a wound that does not destroy, a death that does not end the story. And this is in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. Before everything else, the first whisper of what was coming. Move to Psalm 22. David writes in the first person, describing something he is living through, and he says, They have pierced my hands and my feet. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. And then the psalm does not end in destruction. It ends with a declaration that the one who suffered will be praised among the nations, that all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. A man dying writes a psalm that ends in the salvation of all nations. And the specific details, the hands and the feet, the divided garments, the lots cast, these are not vague poetic images. These are things described in the Gospels as the precise things that occurred at the crucifixion of Yeshua. David wrote this 1,000 years before it happened, and I had read it hundreds of times and seen only a psalm of suffering. Then there is Daniel chapter 9, the prophecy of the 70 weeks, where the angel Gabriel tells Daniel about a precise number of years that will pass between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the coming of the Anointed One, the Mashiach. When you count the years from the decree of Artaxerxes recorded in the book of Nehemiah to the time of Yeshua of Nazareth, the numbers land where they land. The Mashiach comes, and then the Mashiach is cut off. These are the words of the text, cut off and will have nothing, and then the city and the sanctuary will be destroyed. This happened, Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was destroyed. In 70 of the Common Era, 40 years after the crucifixion, exactly as Daniel said, I am a man who devoted his life to these texts. I am telling you that what I found in them, when I was finally willing to look without the glass between me and the painting, was not a surprise. It was a recognition, the feeling of something fitting, the feeling of a key turning in a lock, the feeling of a word finally understood after a lifetime of hearing it spoken in a language you had not yet allowed yourself to fully know. If you are going through something difficult right now, listen to me carefully. God is not absent in your pain. I know it feels that way. I know the silence can feel absolute. I know there are seasons where you pray and the heavens feel like stone and you begin to wonder whether you are speaking into the air. I have lived in that season. And I want to tell you what I have learned. The silence of God is not the absence of God. The silence of God is the sound of God working at a level you cannot yet perceive. When you plant a seed in the ground, there is a period where the ground shows nothing. If you were a seed in the darkness and the pressure and the coldness of the earth, you might wonder whether anything was happening at all. But something is happening. Something profound and irreversible is happening. The structure of the seed is being broken open so that what is inside can emerge. Transformation happens in the hidden place, always, every time. The Hebrew language has a word for this, sod. It means secret, hidden mystery. And I have come to believe that sod is also the name for what God does in the hidden seasons of our lives. He is working below what you can see, below what you can measure, below what your feelings can detect. He is doing something in you that requires the darkness, that requires the pressure of the season you are in. And what is being formed is not something small. There is something God showed me in the early hours of that morning, and it is this. The darkness before the dawn is not the same darkness as the darkness of midnight. It looks the same. It feels the same. But it is not the same. The darkness before the dawn is already pregnant with light. The light is already there, already coming, already present in the air, even if your eyes cannot yet see it. If you are in a season that looks like it has no morning in it, I want you to consider the possibility that the darkness you are sitting in is not the darkness of midnight. It is the darkness before the dawn. I want to tell you about prayer in those early morning hours. In my tradition, there is a prayer called the Shacharit, the morning prayer, and the tradition assigns to this time a quality called kavana, directed intention of the heart. Not the repetition of words, but the alignment of the whole being toward God. What the mystics of my people have always known is that the hours before dawn carry a particular quality of spiritual receptivity. The world is quiet. The demands of the day have not yet begun. And in that space, if you are willing to be there, something becomes possible that is harder to reach in the middle of the day. I have met God most directly in those hours. If you wake at 3 or 4 in the morning and cannot return to sleep, I want to suggest that you do not fight it. Do not try to reclaim the sleep. Rise. Find a quiet place. Open your hands, literally palm up as a gesture of receiving. And speak honestly. Speak the thing you have not been able to say out loud. The fear, the grief, the confusion. Say it to God the way you would say it to someone who loves you and will not judge you and has all the time in the world to listen, because that is exactly who is there. Let me tell you about a Hebrew word that I think will change something in you. The word is chesed. It is one of the deepest words in the Hebrew language, one of those words almost impossible to fully translate, because it contains inside it a whole understanding of God and relationship and time. Most English Bibles translate it as loving kindness or steadfast love. But chesed is a love that does not end when it encounters reason to end. Chesed is a loyalty that does not break under pressure. Chesed is the love that finds you in the desert. Chesed is the love that was already on its way to you before you had done anything to deserve it, and that will still be on its way after you have done everything to forfeit it. The psalmist says his chesed endures forever. The Hebrew repeats this like a heartbeat through Psalm 136, 36 times, kilolam chasto, for his chesed endures forever. Whatever you are carrying right now, whatever you have done or left undone, whatever you think might have exhausted God's patience with you, his chesed endures. It does not run dry. It has been pursuing you since before you were born, and it is not finished with you yet. I want to say something about faith because there is a misunderstanding about it that causes great suffering, and it is one I lived with for a long time. Faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is not the feeling of certainty. I have met many sincere and devout people who believe that if they truly had faith, they would not doubt, that doubt was a sign of weakness or failure. And I want to say clearly from the experience of a long life, this is wrong. Doubt is not the enemy of faith. Doubt is often how faith grows. The faith that has never been questioned is brittle. The faith that has been put in the fire and come through the fire is strong. If you are in a season of questioning, if the foundations feel less solid than they once did, do not be afraid of this. Bring it to God. He is not offended by your questions. He is the source of truth. He can handle everything you are carrying, including the parts of it you have not yet found words for. For 40 years I was a Jewish rabbi, and I never understood this until I understood who was the fullest expression of that chesed in human form. Because Yeshua, the one the Gospels describe, the one who looked at the woman caught in sin and said to her, "Neither do I condemn you," the one who wept at the tomb of Lazarus before he raised him, the one who in the hour of his deepest anguish cried out the opening words of Psalm 22, as if to say to anyone with ears to hear, "Look, it is what was written." This man was the chesed of God, made visible and approachable and present in a way that could be touched and known. The Torah teaches that no one can see God's face and live, and yet in Yeshua the invisible became visible. The untouchable became touchable. The love that had always existed, that had always been pursuing the human soul, put on a face. I know that some of you listening to me come from a Jewish background and are carrying the sense that faith in Yeshua and Jewish identity are in opposition, that to believe in him is to betray the tradition of your fathers and mothers. I stood at that place for years. I felt its weight. What I found on the other side of it was not the abandonment of everything I had learned, but the completion of it. I did not leave the Torah when I came to believe in Yeshua. I found the Torah alive in him in a way I had not known before. The root does not disappear when the flower blooms. The root is what makes the flower possible. I am still a son of Abraham. And I believe with everything I am that Yeshua is the promised seed through whom all the nations of the earth will be blessed. As God told Abraham in Genesis, as the prophets announced across centuries, as the psalmists glimpsed and sometimes wept about without fully knowing what they were seeing. Let me tell you about a Hebrew word that carries the whole story inside it. The name Yeshua means salvation. It is formed from the root yasha, to save, to deliver, to bring to safety. It is the same root as the name Joshua Yehoshua, the one who led Israel into the promised land. Every time someone in the first century spoke that name, they were speaking a word that contained the entire memory of what God had done for Israel across 1,000 years. This is what is in the name. And when I say it now, when I say it knowing what I know, I feel something I can only describe as recognition. Something fitting, something ancient and alive at the same time. I am getting older. My beard has been white for some years. I move more slowly than I once did. And I find, as the years pass, that I am less interested in arguments and more interested in the truth. Not truth as a system to be defended, but truth as a living thing, something you can feel in the room when it is present, something you recognize the way you recognize the face of someone you love. I have been sitting with this truth for 30 years now, since that night in my study, and it has not gotten smaller. It has gotten larger. It has filled more of my life. The more I understand, the more I see that I have not yet understood. And instead of being discouraging, this is one of the most beautiful things I have ever experienced, because it means the depth is real, because it means there is always more. God knows your name. Not the way a record knows a name, the way a shepherd knows each of his sheep by name. The way a father runs toward a returning son while he is still a long way off, before the son has had a chance to rehearse his apology, before the son has done anything to earn the welcome that is already running toward him. God knows your name in the way the psalm describes it. I knew you before I formed you in the womb. I knit you together in your mother's body. The days ordained for you were written in my book before one of them came to be. You are known. You are seen. You are not a category or a statistic. You are a soul, singular and unrepeatable, and there is a love that has been pursuing you since before you knew you needed to be pursued. In those early hours of the morning, when you wake and cannot say why, when the silence is pressing on you, when the fear or the grief or the unnamed weight is there with you in the dark, know this: you are not alone in it. Something is there. Someone is there. And the silence that feels like absence is not absence. It is the sound of the divine presence working at a depth below what you can currently perceive, in the hidden place, in the sod of your life, forming something that only this particular darkness can form, carrying you through a passage that requires the dark to navigate, and on the other side of which is a morning that will make the weight feel, if not small, then necessary, then part of a story that is not over and has never been over, and whose final word, when it comes, will be a word of such beauty and completeness that every question you ever asked in the dark will not so much be answered as dissolved, the way shadows are dissolved not by being argued with, but by the arrival of the light. This is what I believe. This is what 70 years of living has taught me. God is real. He hears. He answers. His chest endures forever. And you, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying, however long you have been carrying it, you are held in a love that the whole universe was made to express. The God who breathed the stars into being knows your name. He is not finished with your story. He was never going to be.